Hello, 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 everybody, and welcome to something that's slightly different from normal Superstar PartyPlex things. My name is Mira, and I will be reading some James lore today. On the first part of the docket is Dying Days. Trigger warning for character death, angst, torture, a lot of wump. The link to the fanfic will be posted alongside in the description of the video if you want to read along. But we are reading this aloud so we can have some of the lore be more accessible for some of our people in the campaign. So yeah, my name is Mira, and this is Dying Days. I'll read a little bit of the summary first, and then we'll start going into the actual chapters, because I actually wrote a summary for this, since I cross-posted it onto AO3. Dying Days. Before he came to the Superstar PartyPlex, James Thomas had a life. A loving adoptive father, a loving grandfather-butler, and a loving but busy older brother. He's a hero. Peregrine. Sidekick to the best vigilante in Civic City, Nightjar. Nothing could touch him. But then Branson McKinely falls off a garden roof. Then the mass serial killer, the Trickster, the one who laughs, escapes from the high-security prison and asylum, Mahkra. And then everything changes. Chapter 1. Zenith. Civic City was a place full of chaos and danger. You didn't go to Civic City unless you had no other option, because the city didn't let go. Once you were there, you often didn't come out again. Not for very long. Gotham. That's what Civic City's people called her. Even in death, Gotham did not release her people, especially those she claimed as her beloved knights. Why did I say Davis? James Thomas Wright never gave much thought to why Gotham was called Gotham. The city just was. It made sense. Of course she wouldn't let go. The people here were hers. It was something that just bound people together. When they lived on Gotham streets for long enough, she didn't let go. Maybe it was the smog or the way all of the buildings stubbornly stayed in grayscale, except for when the cloudy smog parted for the rare glimpse of sunshine and lit the world up in Oh, 1 second. Sorry, my grandparents were saying goodbye. Shoot, where was I? We'll just start the paragraph again. Maybe it was the smog or the way all the buildings stubbornly stayed in grayscale except for when the cloudy smog parted for a rare glimpse of sunshine and lit the world up in glorious rays of yellow and white. Maybe it was the way the river was full of sludge and toxic chemicals that stubbornly stayed put despite all the relief funds millionaire Nicholas Wright poured into the projects. Maybe it was the way that at night, the lights shimmered with hope and the sky radiated a smoggy orange from the city glow, illuminating the city's backdrop like paper cutouts. It was beautiful. It was a cesspool of scum and villainy. It was home. But just because it was home didn't mean James didn't want to help improve it. He was 15 when he took up the mantle of Peregrine. 15 when his older brother begrudgingly gave him permission to wear his mask, as the other had grown wings far too large to be known as a falcon anymore. So Peregrine the First flew off to be Kingfisher, while Peregrine the Second soared under the watchful gaze of their father and mentor, Nightjar. James knew his father wasn't exactly happy that he was following Peck's footsteps in fighting crime and defeating villains who threatened the city. But James loved Gotham. He had Gotham in his blood. He was born and raised Gothamite to his core, brought up on the thrum of the streets, and he had learned to listen to her heart. Nick had taken James from the streets, but he could never take the streets from James. James had something Nick couldn't quite understand, even though his own love for Gotham could rival James's own. Nick didn't have to worry about where food came from, or what to do when winter fell. James had. It changed you, shook you to your core. So James helped. In and out of the cape, in and out of the mask, he used his newfound influence to campaign for more shelters for the homeless, more halfway houses, more food pantries, and more places that were warm and safe. Inside and out of Crime Corner, the place that had once been known as East Square, James made sure his people were taken care of, that people weren't overlooked. He never wanted others to go through what he went through. So James funded food drives and donations, pressing for generosity outside of the Animus season, because people needed things outside of just one winter holiday. He even buckled down and hosted galas under his father's banner, using the right name to fund more initiatives than he could have ever done on his own. He did it because he loved Gotham. He loved the people. He loved his home. But sometimes James hated the people in Gotham. Sometimes people were just bad. This case that Peregrine and Nightjar were on was one of the worst James had seen. Crooked cops, corrupt and greedy judges, and a mobster man walking free despite having murdered so many people. Branson McKinley wined and dined in his penthouse like he didn't have the blood of 6 working girls on his hands. It made James's blood boil, and the only reason why Peregrine hadn't launched himself through the skylight already was Nightjar's firm grip on his shoulder. "And," Peregrine complained, careful to stay quiet despite his agitation. "Branson McKinley is the worst of the worst. Why can't we just take him in and force him to be seen by the not crooked judge?" "We don't have the proof, Peregrine," Nightjar growls, his voice rumbling. James idly kicks at the roof with his armored boot with a grumble. "I hate this. We know he's the one who killed Marley and Coco, and there's probably more people who are under the ground because of him." Below them, the party rages on. Drunken laughter floats up from the skylight just a few feet below the ledge the 2 vigilantes are perched on. It makes the younger vigilante scowl darkly, anger swirling up in a messy tangle in his chest. "Nightjar, seriously, what if they do something tonight?" Peregrine argues in a hiss, shifting his weight. Nightjar's grip on his shoulder tightens slightly, not enough to hurt, but enough to be felt through leather armor. "Peregrine, we will catch them if they do. We just need more evidence for the court system." "Then why aren't we going down there and getting it?" "I said no." "And why not?" Peregrine argues, scowling up at Nightjar's cowled face. "This guy needs to be off the streets." The laughter fades a little, like a retreating wave at sea before it returns, louder. Commotion as the crowd of mobsters shifts and ebbs with the flutes of champagne and other alcoholic beverages being served and held in hand. Something is happening. Something that sets Peregrine's instincts on edge. He shifts again, but this time, Nightjar doesn't stop him from moving. It's a good thing, because from the crowd, a young woman is thrown down at Branson McKinley's feet to raucous laughter. She is clearly terrified, and younger than her makeup would let someone believe, mascara streaking with tears. Her line art shakes with fear, her pretty hair slipping out of its bun. She's not one of the girls James knows by heart, who stand on the corners and flirt with anyone who will give them a second glance. She's in a smart pencil skirt with a pretty blouse. Her wrists are tied behind her back, and someone has used a balled-up handkerchief and a tie as gag. It doesn't even swallow her shaky scream, just muffles it slightly as it melds into the laughter. James knows that she will die by the end of the night if they don't do something. Nightjar is right behind him when they break through the glass, an Aarakocra silhouette possessed by living shadows, led by the bright figure of a peregrine falcon in spandex. Peregrine laughs bright and warm as he lands on one mobster who is reaching for the victim, and the shadows that is his father lay waste to another who is fumbling for their gun. The shots ring out, but Peregrine is used to this song and dance, humming as he kicks the nearest thug's gun from his hand. The wrist is so fragile, it snaps back easily, and James knows with satisfaction that there will be no more shooting for this man. He dances his way through the chaos, grabbing another mobster by the hand and tugging him into a brief waltz that would make anyone who isn't a trained acrobat dizzy, laughing brightly. He kicks his opponent in the balls, forcing the man to bend over in half, and then Peregrine's next blow sends him crashing to the ground, wheezing in pain. Peregrine is at the young woman's side in the next moment, a jarring cutting through her bindings in the gag. He makes a soft little noise as the woman plasters herself against him, and he automatically grabs her arms around his. He automatically wraps his arms around her. He's glad for his strength training as he scoops the Toon Woman up, murmuring reassurances. Nightjar has taken most of the fight further into the penthouse hallways, the echo of gunfire making the poor woman flinch in Peregrine's arms. He murmurs soothing responses each time a shot rings out, his hand gently fixing her hair as they scoot through cover to cover. They get down to the elevators, away from the firefight, and James gently settles her down onto her feet, yellow gloves on her shoulders. Keep going down to the main floor and call the police. Ask for Commissioner Graham Bell. Tell them that Peregrine and Nightjar rescued you, all right? Commish is a good one. She tosses him a grateful look as the elevators close with a soft ding. You damn bird, you stole my bitch! Peregrine has seconds to dodge the barrage of bullets that punch holes in the drywall and into metal, cartwheeling away with a laugh. Stealing is for objects, Mr. McKinley, Peregrine shoots back, and it sure looks like the good lady didn't want anything to do with you and your blokes. She has great taste. McKinley responds by opening another barrage of fire. Peregrine sticks out his tongue and blows a raspberry. Yee! Missed me! He pirouettes around a few more bullets that leave the shape of him and his cape outlined in the wall. Wow, you're bad at this! Branson McKinley spits out a foul curse that makes Peregrine whistle, his penciled-on eyebrows rising as the mobster throws an empty clip away and reloads. Wow, really upping the rating on this one, huh, bruv? You little brat, I'll see you dead in the ditch. I'll fill your shoes with cement and toss your unconscious body into the river. Peregrine yawns as he dodges into a lean against the doorframe of the penthouse garden terrace. Wow, how original. All you mobsters have the same lines. The fight moves out into the gardens. Eventually, Branson McKinley runs out of bullets. Peregrine is expecting the fight to go downhill after, but not to the point that it does. Branson McKinley is actually pretty decent at hand-to-hand, but Peregrine is better. They trade blows, and Peregrine trades quips as easy as breathing. Neither of them notice getting closer to the edge. Neither of them notice that there's a differently animated cell right by the edge. This is a canon event, and neither of them would be able to stop this. Gotham can't stop this. The railing and cement crumbles when Branson McKinley hits it back first. His shout cut off by shock, and it's like time melts into nothing as the well-dressed mobster hangs in the air. Peregrine grips the good part of the shattered and crumbled railing and extends his full arm's length. His fingers miss by centimeters, close enough to feel the heat of McKinley's skin, but far enough away that he can do nothing but watch as the man is swallowed up by the darkness of Gotham's concrete underbelly. Peregrine! Warm, strong arms grab him around his waist and hoist him away from the edge, away from the crumbling concrete and rebar. James fights tooth and nail to escape, a hoarse scream leaving his throat. No! No, 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 no! Nick Wright cradles his baby bird close to his chest, hating how his son's screams fade into sobs as they grapple away into the night as police sirens wail to a stop at the bottom where a man's grave now exists. This is a canon event. Nothing can change this. Drink break. If you haven't taken a sip of water, please do so now. Chapter 2. Revolve. The news is in an uproar. Peregrine kills? Caped Crusaders, are they really on our side? I didn't kill him, James says hollowly as he stares at the Civic City Chronicle that Nick has open while he slowly sips his coffee. Nick blinks up at James, visibly startled. I didn't kill McKinley, James repeats. Nick looks back down at his newspaper and folds it up, hiding the headline into little squares. I don't think we should talk about it here and now, Jamie. His voice is low. Dad, I didn't kill him! James shoots to his feet. You gotta fucking believe me, Dad! He fell! I didn't push him! I was trying to grab him! Not right now, James, Nick says sharply, and it's with enough force that James flinches back, expecting a blow that will never come outside of strict sparring. It makes Nick soften, just a little. We can talk about it downstairs, Jamie. I just don't want to talk about Cape business in the manor. Especially not over breakfast. You know how Alfred is. James is still shaking from the exchange, hands tightly fisted to his sides. His jaw works soundlessly for a moment, his black curls curtaining his vibrantly blue eyes, the highlights shimmering with unshed tears. Fine, he says, voice tight. He grabs a scone and shoves it into his red hoodie pocket. I'll be downstairs. Jamie. But James is already out the door. There is a cough from a certain elven butler. Well, that was not how I would have handled it, my dear boy. There has to be a separation, Nick replies, short and curt. That's not what he needed, and you know it. Now go fix this before he does something we will all grieve over, Alfred scolds, taking the folded newspaper with a disdaining sniff. Things do not get fixed. Nick says the wrong things, and he knows they are the wrong things the moment they slip out of his mouth. He wants to catch them in the air, to cram them back into his own throat before they can hit James's ears. But even if he were attuned, Nick doesn't think it would work that way. James's face morphs into something Nick never wants to see again. It crumples in a way, his lips turning down and his shoulders rising to protect his ears, his hands fists at his sides again. You're benched until further notice, Nick says, trying to project his worry and love for his son into his words, that he doesn't want James to go out when the public's opinion is against them like this. But it doesn't work, just like it never does. His words come out rough and dark and angry, because of course he's angry. He's angry that the papers would ever think that Peregrine would push someone off the side of a building. He's angry that the city is lashing out at a young hero, when heroes have been a staple of the entire continent. Adventurers founded Civic City. It was natural adventurers, even masked ones, would defend Gotham. It makes him angry for his son. The anger comes out in his words without his meaning to. It is an anger born out of love, but an anger nonetheless. And when James sees it, his own anger flares up to meet him blow for blow. Fine, James hisses, body tense like a taut wire ready to snap, ligaments trembling. I didn't want to go out in the mask anyways. He spins on his heel, jerking up his red hoodie. James! He's given the middle finger as James stalks away towards the garage where all the vehicles are kept. Fuck off, Nick. I don't want to hear your bullshit. And Nick finds he can't even speak words to scold James for his language. All his words lodge in his throat like knives, cutting into his skin sharply from the inside out. His hand, which had been outstretched, lowers to his side. James parks the stolen motorcycle in a decrepit alleyway somewhere deep in the heart of Crime Corner. Well, parking is a generous term for what he's done, letting the bike fall against roughly sketched brick with a crash that barely gives him any satisfaction at all. Let someone steal those wheels. James was past caring at this point. It wouldn't even make Nick blink to replace the bike. Bitterness is sour on his tongue as he pulls out his phone and dials a familiar number he had never exactly thought he'd call, while he begins to climb a fire escape to the roofs. You have reached the cell phone of Edward Peck Silverson. If this is Nick, fuck off. If this is anyone else, pardon my language and leave a message for me telling me how I can help you. Toodles. At the tone, please record your message. Beep! James sucks in a deep breath as he settles his weight out on the edge of the apartment, clear of any windows. Hey, Peckface, it's me. I had an argument with N. It's bad, Peck. I wish you were here. You said I could call any time, but I just need you to call me back, okay? Please call me back. His eyes burn, and he can't hide the shaky breath that leaves him as he lowers his phone and hangs up. He doesn't know if the noise got on the recording. He hopes it didn't. He doesn't want Peck, golden child, Silverson, to know he was crying. But he wants his big brother. He wants the man who had promised him to do whatever it took to be on James's side, not just Nick's. He wants Peck to grapple up from the side of the building in full kingfisher gear and scoop him up in his strong arms, shaped by crazy flips and even wilder acrobatics. He wants one of those stupid octopus hugs that Peck gives until James stops feeling like a shitty fake hero. James looks down at his phone and watches as the number slips to the next, time marching steadily onward. Peck hadn't returned his call. Not yet. Maybe James should give him some time. Peck said he was possibly going out of town in the next few weeks. James is climbing down the last fire escape when Mrs. Jones flags him down, the elderly Toon having helped look after him when his mother had work doubles, when his bastard sperm donor was in prison. Jamie! Oh, you've gotten so big! That right boy is treating you well! Her watery eyes swoop over his frame in a way that didn't feel invasive, but instead gave James a warm chest-swelling feeling of appreciation and fondness. It was clear she was just trying to make sure he was okay. He scrubs at his eyes a little and sniffs. Yeah, he is, Mrs. Jones. And our butler feeds me really well, too. I just, we had a row, me and Dad did. His voice is small. It's my fault. I messed up something really bad, and we had ended up yelling at each other, and I ran off here because I needed to breathe. Oh, dearie. Miss Jones sighs, soft and sympathetic. Why don't you come inside and have a cuppa and a biscuit? I have something of your mother's that I was able to save before Mr. Hendricks looted your apartment. James's eyes widen. Really? Something for Mom? His voice is small. Mrs. Jones's wizened face softens even more. A box and some important papers. I knew you'd eventually need them, so I kept them all safe and sound. His vision blurs as his eyes begin to leak again, burning. Thank you, Mrs. Jones, he chokes out. She opens her door wider, stepping away from the stoop, and James slips inside to breathe in familiar scents he hadn't smelt since he was 11 and unaware of his mother's illness. Bergamot, chamomile, and lavender, the floral scents almost baked into her soft linens and her cushions. She guides him to her couch and pads off in her pink slippers to go fetch the kettle for tea. James fidgets with his phone idly, turning it on and off with a press of a button. Peck hadn't called back yet. He swipes away notifications from Nick, frowning to himself. He doesn't want to hear anything Nick has to say right now. Mrs. Jones returns with a tea tray and a medium-sized shoebox. She sets the tray down on the coffee table and hands James his saucer. There we go, laddie. A nice cuppa, and then you can take your mama's box back and look it over some. James carefully adds a few sugar cubes and milk to his tea. Thank you again, Mrs. Jones. Oh, pish-posh, Mrs. Jones dismisses. Crime Corner looks after one another. Gods know the rest of the city doesn't. Your mama did so much for me. How could I turn away her dear boy when he needed a good cuppa and a place to decompress? James hides his smile behind his teacup. Still, I appreciate it. Is there anything I could do to help around the apartment while I'm here? I kind of need something to do. Mrs. Jones pauses and squints thoughtfully at the middle distance, blinking her dot eyes behind her spectacles. Well, you could perhaps help an old lady with her light bulbs. James giggles a little. I can do that, he agrees. Nightjar is long on patrol by the time James gets back to the manor and is met with the visibly fretting Alfred at the door. It makes James feel just a tad bit bad, but it's soon set aside as the old elf tugs James into a hug. Oh, my dear boy, please drop me a line before you go rushing off into the dark again, Alfred murmurs, squeezing James closer, but never so tight that it squishes the shoebox clutched in James's hands. Sorry, Alfie, James says quietly. I needed to escape the manor for a bit. Dad he didn't... His voice dies as he begins to sniffle a little. Oh, my boy, Alfred murmurs, hand cupping the base of James's head. It will be all right. Come in now. You're home. Let's get you fed, And he's led inside into the warmth that feels so much grander than what James is used to, even with the years he's been adopted. But the elf is right. It is home. Whew. Another drink break. If you have not had water, sip some now. Chapter 3. Aperture. Trigger warnings. Abusive biological parents. Just kind of mentioned. Yeah. The shoebox is a treasure trove hidden away in the cardboard, resting on his bed as he looks through it. It has the last surviving picture of James and his mom, carefully taped up with aging Scotch tape to keep it laminated. James will have to properly laminate it before the tape dissolves completely. It contains letters and important documents. James finds his found family paperwork. It has his name on it. It has his mother's name on it. Charlene Charlie Thomas. Stepmother. He sits down heavily on the floor. His mom wasn't... He could have a mom still out there? He had someone else other than Nick and Alfred and Peck? James grabs the shoebox and grabs the letters that Mrs. Jones had saved for him. A lot of them were from his sperm donor, Liam Thomas, to people he didn't recognize. Some of them were from his stepmom to Liam Thomas. He looked at the names that sounded feminine. 3 other feminine sounding names kept popping up. Lillian Hope, Sorrel Foster, Kuro Mizuki. Mizuki. There we go. 3 other women that his sperm donor had relations with. Ugh. James doesn't really want to think about that, so he doesn't, firmly shutting that door. He wants to find his mom. He wants to ask her why she left him with an abusive piece of shit for a father. James uses the jar computer when Nightjar is away on patrol, and during the time when Alfred has dozed off. Alfred is watchful, but he can't be everywhere at once. He can't stay awake 24/7, even with the need for a trance instead of true sleep. Ooh, hiccups. There's a small fraction of time where James can get away with his research. A small window where James is left unsupervised. He puts it to good use with the resources he has. He searches up where his 3 candidates are. Lillian Hope is in Faruma, a special forces agent working to dismantle the tune trade and help reintroduce trafficked tunes back into society. He looks at the dates, the records where Lillian had been in Einquell and Liam Thomas had been out of prison and running his stupid grifts and getting into trouble with the law. He compares them to his birth certificate, which frustratingly has had bad handwriting that James can't even really recognize the name of his sperm donor on the line. Lily and Hope had been across the ocean when James was born, attending a conference dedicated to bringing awareness to the plight Toons faced in Zatori, to the horrible way some of them were treated. James is disappointed to find a video recording time stamped with the date of his birth exactly. Lily and Hope, in the middle of giving an impassioned speech. She seems like she would have been a really cool mom. He crosses her off the list he'd written on a sticky yellow pad with a soft sigh. Kuro Mizuki is a dangerous martial artist, hailing from Ghibli. She kills all of her opponents in matches to the death, trying to find the one who will actually finally defeat her and take her title as one of the best. James stars her name on a sticky note list and writes down, "Visit with Dad?" Sorrel Foster is a doctor. She helps run a non-profit to help Toons and Realkind get access to specialized medicines for rare conditions. She just happens to have an office at one of the better districts in Gotham. In Gotham. Gotham? What's Gotham? In Gotham. She was in town. She had just gotten in on the bus the other day. She was in town. James could finally meet her face to face. He could ask her so many things, especially if she really was his mom. The pieces were falling into place, something finally going right for him. James hacks into the scheduling software Sorrel Foster's assistant, Emily Parks, uses, and jots down the times when Sorrel is going to be in town for the next 2 weeks. He erases his tracks, scrubbing his searches and activity from the jar computer, and makes it look like he'd never even visited the jar cave to security cameras. This, too, is a canon event. There is nothing stopping this from happening. James skips school to go to the cafe that Sorrel Foster frequents when she is in town. It apparently has the best coffee in the entire city block. James sips his coffee and finds he prefers what Alfred makes. The combination of caffeine and anxiety makes his fingers tremble, and he shoves his hands in his red hoodie pockets. The letters between his bastard of a sperm donor and Sorrel Foster are heavy in his back pockets, like they were weighted coal still smoldering into embers from a fire. He buys a package of cookies and anxiously eats them as he watches the entrance door. The sugar doesn't help. It just makes him jittery and restless. Butterflies eat his insides, making his stomach flutter and churn in sickening ways. According to the CCTV, Sorrel Foster usually arrives at the cafe between noon and 3 p.m. She will stay for an hour and then leave the premises with a drink carrier of additional coffee and some pastries in a paper bag, presumably for herself and her assistant, depending on her schedule for the day. James has been waiting for over an hour already, and it's edging towards being a late 3 p.m., where James will have a very limited amount of time to ask his questions before he's expected to be in the pickup lane at Gotham Academy for Alfred to escort back home at 3:30 p.m. As his watch hits 2:40 p.m., James sees her. Sorrel Foster is a tall woman with an amount of curve to her body that hints towards possibly having carried at least one child to term. Her hair is a bright, vibrant yellow, unlike his own dark hair. But they have the same curl, similar ways their highlights fall against the curvature of their scalps. They have the same color of blue in their eyes. He just might have her nose, and the way her jaw curves with a smooth line might just be his, too, before he'd started his transition and his jaw had started to shift to something more masculine. Everything that he has that still remains soft looks like it was from her design. His hands won't stop shaking. He sucks in a shaky breath and throws away his trash, the papers in his back pocket crinkling and making him hyper-aware of their presence. "Mrs. Foster?" He addresses her quietly, trying yet failing to keep her voice steady. She looks up from a book she had been reading, a pleasant smile on her face. "How can I help you, young man?" He swallows again. "Do you recall a man by the name of Liam Thomas?" Her gaze narrows, and James can feel the way she looks at him harder, reading the shape of his shoulders, the toned build of a body that is just barely growing into broader shoulders and a bigger frame held back by malnutrition from childhood. James can see the moment when everything clicks, and her eyes widen and her gaze warms. A smile spreads across her beautiful face, and James, for one moment in his very gay life, sees what his sperm donor must have been drawn to. Some might say they have the same smile. James doesn't know who moves first, but they're hugging, and James is crying softly, and she is holding him so warm and so close, gentle hands wiping away tears. For the first time in a long while, James melts and feels the safety of a mother's touch embrace him fully. James asks her all sorts of questions in the time between 2:40 p.m. and 3 p.m. She learns that she had wanted him desperately, but she had been dealing with her own health crumbling under her, and she had trusted Liam Thomas when he promised he would look after James while she clawed her way back to health again. James learns that she had had the door slammed in her face when James had been 3. Liam Thomas was seeing a new beau. Beau? I'm gonna say beau. A new beau, and she didn't want her anymore. And he didn't want her anymore. The legal battle had been fierce, but with her recent health scare, well, the stress had done her in once more, and she'd lost the case. By the time she had known about James, by the time she had known about James being left all alone in the world, when she had finally become successful and stable, it had been too late. James had vanished to the streets, and then adopted by Nicky Wright, and then, even as bumbling as full of a man he was, there was no way Sorrel would have won against that kind of money, even as affluent as she was now with her doctorate and her thriving practice and the non-profit succeeding with her leadership. "Are you happy, baby?" she asks him softly, cupping his cheek. "Are you happy with Nicky Wright?" James hesitates. "We had an argument a few days ago," he admits quietly. "It's how I found out about you being my mom. I went back to my old apartment complex to clear my head, and a neighbor gave me some important documents and some letters." He digs them out of his pocket and hands them, slightly crumpled now, over. "I only read enough to figure out if you and the bastard were dating at one point." There is a sharp expression on her face that transforms her soft features into something dangerous, but it's gone before James can really register it, her painted lips moving into a lovely smile. "That's all right, baby," she coos as her painted nails smooth down the letters. "It was so nice of you to return them to little old me." Before James can really think of a proper response to that, the ring of a cell phone splits the air between them. "Oh, one moment, sweetie," she murmurs. "I gotta take this." James watches as she stands up and places her manicured hand to her ear as she holds the phone close. "Tee, darling, I know you don't like it when we change up our plans to chat, but could I call you back? It'll only be No, darling, nothing like that. It's just a family member. It's just a family matter." "What? Oh, no, I couldn't possibly..." "Yes, I understand." The longer the conversation goes, the more James grows worried. He grows alarmed when Sorrel hangs up the call and grabs James by the wrist. "We need to leave. Now." And then, trapped by the fact that he can't fight like Peregrine, he's dragged out of the coffee shop. A waitress is already at the front door, a smile on her face that's stretched too wide across her lips, her teeth just a little too sharp. His pulse slams into his wrist against Sorrel's hand wrapped around the joint in the bend. She's gripping him so tight, her knuckles are white. But she takes the bag in one hand. "Hold the coffee, James," Sorrel says, and it's a sharp tone that has James leaping to obey without thinking. He holds the drink carrier in one hand, and his stomach swoops when he counts 3 cups instead of 2. What was going on? The alarm morphs into a dread as his own phone buzzes in his hoodie pocket in a steady rhythm. The code for a breakout from Mahkra asylum. The seconds drag into an eternity. Bzz, 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 bzz. James feels all the ink run down from his face. Trickster had broken out of Mahkra. Once again, take a drink break if you have not already. Chapter 4. Dark Matter. Trigger warning for abusive bio parents, Trickster being very creepy. James can't pull away from Sorrel. They enter a small shop off the main roads, tucked away in one of the alleys. It's a dark shop, full of dark red velvet drapes that soften the walls, so dark it's almost crimson. It's hard to see in the shop once the door is shut, but James can see muted shapes of mannequins in the shadows of the drapes. It makes his skin crawl and his line art shivers. Mom? Quiet, baby, Sorrel responds sharply. And James' mouth snaps shut audibly. His grip on the coffee tightens. One second, answering for Ren in the audience. It's mainly just holding tight and a bit of betrayal at the end of the chapter. Spoilers. Okay. Of course. Hug. Okay. Whew. Where were we? Okay. It's hard to see in the shop once the door is shut, but James can see muted shapes of mannequins in the shadows of the drapes. It makes his skin crawl and his line art shivers. Mom? Quiet, baby, Sorrel responds sharply, and James's mouth snaps shut audibly. His grip on the coffee tightens. And then he hears it, the unmistakable sound of calliope music. It makes his ink run cold, and he tries to stop his mother from pulling him deeper into the shop, but his tennis shoes just slide on soft carpeted floors. A soft, low laugh begins to echo and weave into the music. Do come in! A familiar voice cackles as the mannequins shift in James's peripherals. Dr. Foster and family, do have a seat at my table! Mom! This time, Sorrel doesn't reply, her jaw set tightly. The shadows grow closer. The soft thud of wood against carpeted floor. Mannequins and puppets block the door, hemming them in closer and closer to the sound of the calliope. They move through the dark, shepherded by wood and string and shadows, led by laughter and music. In any other circumstance, it could have been joyous. Trickster sits at a table, low flickering light above their heads. The shadows are thick despite the light source, and the clown's smile is sharp and wide. Shadows shuffle and shamble into pulling the chairs out. Whew. Sorry. And James can't hide his frightened grasp as he's forced to sit across from his mother, the coffee taken out as the cup carrier as he'd been clutching to. And still the calliope plays, loud and deafening now, so close to the source. The only reason it's not heard for miles is some part of the trickster's magic, James is sure. Welcome, the trickster croons, and it's easy for James to see play the frightened civilian, Dr. Sorrel's frightened and long-lost son, flinching as Trickster traces a clawed finger against James's jaw. Dr. Foster, you never told me you had such a sweet angel of a boy. He just found out his father had lied to him for years, Sorrel says quietly. There was no need to invite him to this, I assure you. Trickster's head falls back in manic laughter, shoulders shaking as his crowned jester hat bounces and shakes and jingles. James flinches back, cringing into his seat and barely able to stop himself from covering his ears. Nothing ever good came from a victim of the tricksters covering their ears to try and escape that laugh. You were more likely to lose your head that way. Oh, sorry! Trickster's head jerks up with a snap as he grins sharp and dangerous at James's mother. You always know how to make me laugh. Sorrel gives the monster a tight smile. Of course, Trickster. The monster giggles, head cracking to the side, as his bloodshot eyes turn to look at James, who flinches back at being given such a look by something so dangerous. And isn't it funny to have something so dear to you with us today? Trickster croons, clawed hand gripping James by the jaw and jerking him close. You haven't been very motivated to give me the ingredients I need, Doctor. James can't help the whimper that leaves him eyes wide. He doesn't feel very strong, very powerful right now. He feels helpless without the cape around his shoulders, the mask on his face. Peregrine was magic. But James wasn't Peregrine. He was just James. Stupid, reckless James who had thought he'd researched everything there was to know about his birth mother. He didn't think he'd have to look at her possible dealings with the rotten underbelly of Gotham. He never even thought about the possibility that his mother could be in danger. Sorrel is pale, and she places her hands down on the table, palms up. He's just a boy, Trickster. He's just a boy. I'll get you the serum tonight, I swear. Trickster squeezes James's jaw just a little tighter. He's your boy, sorry, he croons. That makes him special. Ha! Special insurance just for our sorry girl. The Trickster cackles like it had told the most hilarious joke. Sorrel weakly joins, and James chokes out a few giggles himself. He sags as Trickster releases him, claw tips dipped red with James's ink from where they dug into his skin. Oh, what a happy day! Trickster giggles to itself. If it weren't sitting down, it would jump and clap its feet together. You've made my plans come along so much faster, Sonny! A clawed hand pats James on the head. Aren't you such a sweet champ? Thank you, Mr. Trickster, sir. James coughs out, fighting the urge to grit his teeth. Trickster howls with laughter, loud and grating and utterly deranged in a way only a truly evil clown could sound. Ha ha ha! Mr. Trickster was my father, Sonny! James doubts that. He doubts it so much, but he struggles to keep it out of his face, his hands cupping his cheek where it was bleeding red. Trickster claps its claws together. Now, let's break bread! Go on, eat! Reluctantly, Sorrel pulls out the baked goods she had in her bag, and James set out the coffee cups. He notices the violently vibrant teal-green chips in the bagged cookies and feels himself grow paler. Trickster laughs uproariously as the two tunes trade horrified looks. Hee hee hee! A red roulette to see! Who will be like me? Trickster cackles. Now eat! Shadows grip James by the wrist, by the jaw. He struggles against them, a shout in his lungs. The cookie is shoved into his mouth, where there are claws pinching his nose shut, forcing him to either chew or suffocate. He's crying as he swallows. James collapses as soon as he's let go, trembling and coughing. He waits for the horrifying fits of laughter, the hallucinations. He waits. The only thing he hears is Trickster's own howling cackles. The cookie was sweet, a light tang of white chocolate, a hint of food dye. Food dye. Food dye! It was a dud. Just a dud. It wasn't full of Trickster's venom. He wouldn't be dying of laughter. He wouldn't suffocate with that twisted grin on his lips. He would live. He would live! There's some negotiations happening between his mom and the Trickster, the monster's laughter echoing in his ears and making his head buzz. He can't really process things. Not now. Not after just narrowly escaping death. He makes himself small in the chair, something still ridiculously easy to do, and cradles his cheek that was slowly bleeding ink, dripping red between his fingers. Coffee is drunk, Trickster downing all four with the efficiency of an alcoholic with their favorite shot. A few parting words exchanged. James stumbles as Sorrel drags him up to his feet. Head swimming. He needs to call his dad. He needs to tell his dad what's happening. What Trickster is planning next. He needs to save his mom. It's dark by the time they leave the shop. the streets deserted like they often are after a breakout. Sorrel holds him tightly by the wrist and tugs him along until James can't hear the phantom of laughter and calliope. He's shaking. Sorrel is shaking, too. And then she hugs him, clutches him tightly to her chest. "I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry. I never wanted you to see that," she whispers into his curls. He hugs her tightly back, unable to speak, trembling. The tracking bug in his palm burns his skin with how hyper-aware of it he is. He slips it into her back pocket. "I need to go, baby. I'm so sorry," she says, pulling back to cup his unhurt cheek. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I'll see you when it's safe, okay? You stay safe with that Nicky. He's got the best security in Gotham." Yes, Mom," he croaks out. It's not what he wants to say. Not really. Not after just getting her back. But she's already gone before he can say what he really wants to say, and he's left alone. But not for long. A shadow swoops from above, and suddenly James is bundled up in a familiar heavy cape. A sob tears from his throat as Nightjar holds him close. "James, thank gods you're all right," Nick breathes into James's curls, because it's not Nightjar now. It's just Nick. Nick in the jar suit. Nick holding James so very close and safe. There's the sound of a compartment from the jar belt being deployed, and soon there's antiseptic and band-aids being put on James's cheek. "Trickster!" James chokes out. "I know," he broke out. "Where were you?" Nick interrupts. "Alfred couldn't find you, and the school did a count after locking down, and you hacked the school?" James cringes, burrowing his face into Nick's chest. "I found my birth mom," he mumbles. "Oh, Jamie." Nick sounds very heartbroken. "Why didn't you tell me? We could have met her together. I thought you wouldn't trust me. I wanted to prove I could do it on my own, but Dad, Trickster is blackmailing her. She's a doctor. She helps a nonprofit. She needs our help. If she doesn't, Trickster will hurt her. And who knows what else will happen when Trickster is angry. The whole hospital network could be in danger." Nightjar frowns, and he gives James another squeeze. You can pull out the suit from your hammer space. We'll find her. Did you plant a tracker? James nods and pulls out both his suit and his jar device, pulling up the map that shows exactly where Sorrel Foster is headed next. It's the warehouse district. The jar-mobile roars through the streets and pulls to a stop beside Nightjar. James scrambles into the back and slips his mask on, ruffling his curls into something even more messy. It's a simple, quick change to shift into Peregrine. He grins up to Nightjar. "Let's go kick Trickster ass!" Language, Peregrine. They reach the warehouse district, where Sorrel Foster's tractor has her placed to be. The warehouse is dedicated to the medical supplies she keeps up for the nonprofit. James watches as she slips inside and bites at his lower lip anxiously, hand on the door handle. The police scanner crackles to life. "Trickster! Trickster and his men are attacking the central power station! We need backup!" A police officer screams into the radio. The tension rises as James freezes halfway out the door, whirling to face Nightjar. From the way the mask lenses narrow, James can see the indecision on his father's face. "I'll go get her, Dad. You stop Trickster from blowing that popsicle stand and turning Gotham's power off." He hops back a few steps, grinning at Nightjar. "I'll be fine. He's halfway across the city right now, and if you stop him now, Mom will be safe." Nightjar grunts. It's a considering grunt. James is doing so good at this. "Fine, but keep your comms open." James rolls his eyes, grateful his domino mask hides it. Yeah, I will. Agent Alpha is gonna hear all the sappy details about me rescuing my mom." "A pleasure, I'm sure, Master Peregrine," comes the frosty response over the line, and James cringes visibly. "Sorry, Alfie," he apologizes. "Humph. Well, don't let me keep you waiting, gentlemen," Alfred says. "We have a city to save. Ugh, words. Peregrine gets into the warehouse through the attic skylight. Why the warehouse even needs an attic, James doesn't know, but it's convenient and it helps him, so he's not complaining. Peregrine darts across the beams, keeping an eye out for any of Trickster's goons. But the warehouse is empty, except for his mother, Sorrel working tirelessly tirelessly to mix something up in a small beaker that glows an ominous green. He drops soundlessly to the floor, just like he's trained to do. "Dr. Foster," he says, and he winces as he watches her jolt, the mystery serum splashing onto the metal table and beginning to eat through it. "Peregrine!" she gasps, and then scowls. It's a surprisingly cold expression on such a pretty face. "Oh, just what I need." "I'm here to help you, ma'am," James insists, desperate to get Sorrel out of here. "I've learned from a reliable source that you're being blackmailed by Trickster." Her face darkens even more. Her hand goes to her hammer space. "Oh boy. Changing tactics." He switches off his comm and holds out his hands, showing they're empty. "I just want to help you, Mom," he says, letting the corner accent flow back into his voice. It deepens his register. It's not Peregrine talking to a civilian. It's James pleading with his mother. "Mom, it's me. You need to stop this," he gasped out. "You need help. Trickster, he shudders. "Trickster, well, we could have died. But I can help. I can get Nightjar, and as Peregrine, I can help. You don't have to deal with him anymore. I'll make sure of it. Nightjar will listen to me." Her blue eyes are wide. "You're Peregrine," she murmurs. He nods. "Nightjar is good, Mom. He'll help you. He'll help you, and he'll stop Trickster, and he'll help the nonprofit, too. You won't be in trouble, Mom. I promise." Something shifts in her gaze as she lets go of whatever she was going to grab in her hammer space and starts to walk towards him. "Really? She nods. He nods. I just want you to be safe, Mama." "I know, baby. I know." She cups his cheeks. "But Trickster pays me so well, baby." His eyes widen. "What?" His voice comes out as a croak. There is a prick against his neck, a needle. His legs grow weak. The last thing he hears is a soft, reluctant sigh. "You really shouldn't have told me your identity, baby bird." If you haven't already, water break. Take a sip of water. Take a sippy. Chapter 5, Event Horizon. Trigger warning for torture, death. Trickster is very creepy in this chapter again, folks. Please take care of yourselves if you do not want to listen to the character death stuff, because this is the saddest chapter. Okay, alright. James comes to with a low groan, his vision swimming. His head is ringing. Ringing. Wasn't it funny? "Oh, isn't it the boy of the hour?" Trickster laughs, bending over to grip James by the hair and pull him up to his feet. He still feels utterly rotten from the sedative his mother, no, Dr. Foster, had given him, his neck swollen and hot as Trickster swings an arm around his neck. His hands scramble uselessly against the arm, clawing desperately. "Ah! You've been a naughty boy, son," Trickster scolds. "Fuck you!" James snarls, leg kicking back at Trickster. The clown roars with laughter as James's foot goes through nothing at all, like the man was a ghost. Fear floods James. He's never been this close to the monster that is Trickster. Never been this close to register how off the man is. How he was too toony to be real, but too real to be toon. How sharp his teeth and claws were, skin papery and thin. James wondered dimly from the haze of his panic if Trickster would bleed blood or ink. He screams as a claw grips his wrists and wrenches them behind his back. Something thick and rope-like coils around his wrists and wraps tighter and tighter until he loses feeling in his fingers, numbness pricking up and down his arms. "There we go. Naughty birds get taught lessons, you know," Trickster murmurs in his ear. "And you've been the naughtiest, lying Papa Tricky." "You're not my father," James snarls, and he slams his skull against Trickster's stupidly pointy nose. There's a loud crack. A shriek of anger and pain morphing into a howling laughter. James just has enough time to blink tears out of his eyes enough to see the blood ink dripping down a now crooked nose. A grin spreads across James's lips, sharp and vindictive. Your daddy Jari never punishes you brats properly. Trickster seethes past his giggles. Your papa will have to rectify that. Those claws reach up, and with a sickening crunch, cartilage slips back into place. Do your worst, you bastard, James snarls. You're not my dad. You'll never be my dad. My dad is leagues better than you. Trickster clicks his tongue against the roof of his mouth and grabs a crowbar from a pile of random warehouse supplies. Such a shame. James feels the crack of metal against his jaw first, feels the warehouse concrete floor grind into his skin as he collapses against it. There's laughter as his shoulder pops out of place. Something breaks. His collarbone? He doesn't have the leverage to check to pop his shoulder back into place. He spits out ink and gets up again. He manages to stumble dodge the next swing of the crowbar, even with his head ringing and his vision spinning. Oh, boy wonder, boy blunder! You've really outdone yourself, sonny boy! Trickster crows, shadows swirl dizzyingly, making James stumble in a disorientation and nausea. They grab his limbs, try to yank him down into the dark puddles that have become Peregrine's bright yellow boots. Now hold still! The crowbar slams into his ribs, dragging out a scream as the curved hook rips flesh open. He stumbles, trying to stay upright. Another blow to the head sends him careening into the shadows. The ice cold of the dark void pierces through his suit, making him choke and squirm. But his hands are pinned behind his back, held with those strangely sinuous ropes. He can feel another rope coiling around his ankle, and he thrashes, trying to kick the ropes off. Now, James, you can't escape your punishment that easily. Trickster laughs, stomping a foot down on James's chest. He goes rigid, a sharp gasp leaving his throat as his ribs creak. A shimmering lance of psychic power launches itself from Trickster's pale forehead. It strikes James dead center, and he screams. He screams, and he thinks he's sobbing. But what if he's laughing instead? All he can sense is the cold and the pain of his head splitting apart from the inside out. His feet thrash against cold tile, his boots and socks gone. Where did they go? He can't remember, only able to sense the pain. By the time he's stopped screaming, Trickster is giggling and readying his crowbar for another blow. James jerks himself out of the way, trying desperately to get free of his bindings. His hands are useless and numb. The crowbar glints in the dim lighting. It tears into his skin, and he crumples to the cold floor. Oh, that looks like it hurt, Jamie! Trickster coos, crouching down near James's face. You ready to admit who your real papa is, sport? James sucks in a deep breath. Trickster looks dementedly eager to hear what James has to say. James gathers up all of the spit and ink he has in his mouth and spits in Trickster's eye. You're not my dad! He wheezes out. Trickster grips him by the hair and slams his face down. James can't stop the scream as his nose breaks. You ungrateful little brat! Here I am, teaching you a lesson out of the goodness of my heart! Trickster seethes as he grinds James's face further into the ground. James spits out more blood and laughs. You're a shitty teacher if you think pain is ever going to change my mind. He screams again as the crowbar slams into his ribs. Something shatters in the blow, and he coughs up ink, sucking on air raggedly. He can't breathe enough to scream again as the next blow hits, this time striking his forehead and ripping skin on the curved hook. James lets out a groan. Oh, that looks like it hurt a little more, Trickster croons. Did it, baby bird? James coughs a little, wheezing on air. Trickster imitates the noise, leaning forward as if to hear James better. What was that, kiddo? I can't quite hear you down there. James spits out a broken tooth. He's so very spiteful when he sees Trickster recoil and try to shake the tooth fragment out of his ear canal. He lets out a pained grunt as Trickster slams the crowbar down on his jaw, breaking it. Which hurts more, Peregrine? Forehand, slam, or backhand? The answer, of course, was that they both hurt the same. That was what was funny about it. It's just pain. Of course, the trickster found pain to be the most hilarious of all jokes. James is barely conscious when Trickster grips him by the hair one last time. "This has been fun, Jamie, but I think it's time Papa says goodbye." And then he slams James's head into the floor. The words flow in and out of his head. "Be a good boy, Jamie. Get ready for bed on time, and don't forget to brush your teeth." His vision is fuzzing in and out of black. He has to. "And tell the big man hello for me. Won't you, little falcon?" The door shuts. James breathes. He breathes in and out, vision fuzzing like an old TV static. Old TV, static and blackness warring with his nerves that scream with a light with pain. He shifts. His mouth opens in a silent scream. But then he's upright. He's sitting upright. He slowly shifts, bending to thread his feet through his bound arms. He can't feel his hands as they brush against the floor. They're strange and misshapen. He doesn't know how he'll be able to. The thought slips from his head. He staggers up to his feet. His left knee buckles, something shattered, screaming at him not to move. He limps forward, towards the door. He just needs to get outside. Then Dad will find him. He always finds him. Dad will find him. He'll get the tight binding off. He'll help fix the circulation. He'll set James's bones, reset his shoulder. He'll wrap James up in bubble wrap and turn him into a mummy until he's all healed up. His dad will come. Dad always comes. He promised. James reaches the door. He reaches the door, but his hands, they don't work right. He fumbles with the handle. The door is locked from the outside. This is fine. Dad will just... Nightjar will come through a window, or pick the lock and open the door, and it will be fine. It will be fine. He slowly turns around, and with his back pressed against the door, he slides down onto his ass. Nightjar will come. Dad will come. His concussion-blown eyes peer through the broken lenses of his domino, looking through the dim warehouse. A low beeping reaches his ears, finally loud enough to cut through the new silence of the building. 0004. Oh. 0003. Haha. 002. Stupid James. 0002. 0001. You'll die alone. 0000. And that, my friends, is Dying Days.